Our discussion, it's a dialogue between myself and Mr. Shiamishis. We are about to discuss for a few hot topics of the Greek energy sector and the developments that we experienced recently in the Greek energy market and more the regional market, I would say, because the Hellenic Petroleum is also present in, in a number of countries. It's not only a national market player. My first question to Mr. Shiamishis will be that, Hellenic Petroleum, it is in the process of transformation now from a pure oil company, you are in the refining business traditionally, and moving into an energy group. I mean, this is the concept now. We're not talking about utilities anymore. We're not talking about, purely renewable energy companies or oil companies. We're talking about energy companies. So what is the strategy that you have in terms of investments going forward? And where are the key focus groups that you have? Where are you focusing these investments going ahead?
Well, Kostas, thank you very much for the invitation. And I have to congratulate you. It's a very successful so far conference. The items discussed have been very interesting. And all of the speakers have had something which is interesting to hear. So we have the difficult task of getting people back to shape after lunch. So you can have, if you will, the challenge of getting everybody back in the room and keeping them awake. On the point you made about Hellenic Petroleum, well, it's called Hellenic Petroleum for a reason. 90% of our earnings and our invested capital is actually in the liquid fuel value chain, mainly through the refineries, through the retail petrol stations, even the petrochemicals that we have as a business, which is quite material. It's still a value proposition on the liquid fuels business and on the hydrocarbons. However, it's clear that as a group we have determined a strategy which will try and get us engaged in other forms of energy products. And that's done on the basis of two objectives. The first one, it's a very simple and clinical financial objective, which is called hedging. When you have 90% of your earnings driven by the refining margins and the retail margins and the dollar prices, the euro-dollar exchange rates, then it makes sense for a group of our size to try and diversify our way. So we need to add a bit of financial hedging in the system. The second one has to do with moving forward for the next 20 to 30 years with a greener footprint, a cleaner source of energy, and participating in if you will, the energy market of tomorrow, which includes power, gas, and renewables. Now, on those three markets, we are present. We have been present one way or another for the last few years. So natural gas, we participate with a 35% shareholding in DEPA. And clearly, in terms of the strategy going forward, it's something which will be determined based on the privatization process for DEPA. As you know, the DEPA privatization has started with the spin-off of two different companies. We successfully completed the divestment from DESFA last year, which was a very good transaction. It was good for the company, for the buyers, and for the sellers. So the natural gas market is something that is of interest to us, and we will be looking forward to the developments post the privatization. On power generation, we have been in this business since the beginning. I think Hellenic Petroleum, through the T-Power CCGT plant in Thessaloniki, was the first IPP in Greece back in 2003, 2004. So it's not new to us. However, since then, we have seen a lot of ups and downs in the electricity, in the power generation and the electricity business. We can talk about it later if you will. But it is a market which is of interest to us. The issue is Hellenic Petroleum and the joint venture partner, which is Edison, how we will position ourselves with respect to future developments. And that we can cover in a minute. The last part of the equation has to do with renewables. And renewables is a business which is fairly small in Hellenic Petroleum, but we have greater aspirations. And today we have a couple of 100 megawatt in the pipeline as projects. And the idea is to try and get to anything between 300 and 400 megawatts of installed capacity in the next few years. So I think the intention is there, the intent is there, and the resources will be put behind this strategy to help us diversify away from the liquid fuels value chain.
Okay, so in terms of the strategy, I identify the three pillars. One is renewables, picking up from the last one. Of course, is making sure that you are operating in the core business that you are as efficiently as possible, and electricity generation and customers, from what I understand, through the vehicle that you have with HELPE Edison. Touching upon the privatization that you mentioned earlier, Hellenic Petroleum has gone through a process of privatization recently. It is underway as we speak. So what do you think are the biggest challenges that this process is facing at the moment, and how can it benefit, how can it work to the benefit of the company going forward?
Yes, it seems Hellenic Petroleum is engaged and involved in a lot of privatization processes. The sale of DESFA, we have the potential sale of DEPA, the spin-off of DEPA Commercial and DEPA Infrastructure, and also Hellenic Petroleum itself through the recent process which took most of 2018 and the beginning of 2019. Unfortunately, the process did not end up with a successful transaction. I would probably summarize that the main reasons for that have been a couple of, if you will, developments, international market developments outside of our control, and maybe a misalignment of expectations between the sort of sellers and the buyers in certain parts of the transaction documents. Things which are not uncommon in processes like that. A positive thing which came out of this process, which has been quite lengthy, has been the proof of concept for Hellenic Petroleum as a value proposition. Both consortia saw a lot of value in Hellenic Petroleum, and through this process we re-established the value potential for having Hellenic Petroleum as part of a portfolio in a regional portfolio. And there are benefits which have become more obvious to all of the involved parties, things which may lead to improvement in corporate governance, in the corporate structure. Clearly there is a benefit in the funding opportunity for a company like Hellenic Petroleum if we were to participate in a bigger international group. And to a large extent, some of those benefits we will be able to materialize irrespective of the privatization process. However, other things we will not be able to achieve, for example, synergies at an operational or a commercial level in our region, unless we know what sort of format this privatization will take eventually.
Thank you. And just for the sake of, for the friends and the guests and the speakers that are coming from abroad, Hellenic Petroleum is indeed the largest energy group here in Greece, and it is recent that, the past couple of years we have been recording, record profits, which means that, the company needs to see itself, in the good years, how that can evolve and how can it implement its strategy going forward, and look at the best outcome for the shareholders in terms of privatizing that kind of asset. So it is a challenge on one end, can be a very good opportunity on the other hand. Sticking to the privatization concept now, we're talking about all of this. You touched upon also DEPA's privatization. You have a 35% interest in DEPA. As we said, DESFA is already now divested from the group. You have sold that stake that you have. It's a matter of business strategy, I would imagine, because the TSO is a regulated business. You would like to be more on the trading side of things. So, is there a concrete interest for DEPA, and how do you see DEPA's privatization going forward?
Well, DEPA privatization is a concept. I won't call it a project. A concept that I recall as long ago as 2000, mid-2000. When I first joined Hellenic Petroleum, that was back in 2003, 2004, I recall the privatization of DEPA as being one of the issues that the market was working on. 15 years later, we are still trying to privatize the commercial part of DEPA. As you know, the recent legislation has led to two different business units, which I think personally is in the right direction because they are totally different business models. One is an infrastructure business, the other one is a commercial and the retail business. So question mark there whether it's one business or it should be two, but clearly it's in the right direction. Now, there are people who think that because of the market size and the market structure, it might make sense for DEPA to be one whole integrated player. I won't say that this is without any rationale, but in all honesty, the fact that we have a smaller market size doesn't necessarily mean that we need to, if you will, mess with the model and the business model of DEPA as well. We expect that in the next few weeks, the DEPA privatization will be, for the commercial part, will be launched. Clearly, Hellenic Petroleum is interested in natural gas in Greece. We already have our own venture through HELPE in gas and electricity sales. It's a smaller footprint, of course. So natural gas as a business is something which is of interest to us. How that will translate as far as the DEPA privatization process is concerned is probably early days to say.
That's clear. In terms of the Greek energy market, what is your view overall about the structure of the market and the developments with the Hellenic Energy Exchange that we have seen also a discussion in the previous panel?
Well, the Greek energy market clearly is in need of some acceleration in terms of the developments. I think if you play back the last couple of conferences, you will probably hear exactly the same thing being discussed last year and the year before. It's no secret that we are very good at designing concepts and market structures, but are very poor at implementing them. So, for example, on the energy exchange, which is something which is quite critical, and especially for companies like us who have invested real money in real assets with power plants, when you are asked to go without flexibility and capacity certificates, just to sort of mention some real-life examples, and you're deprived of a remuneration. High or low, it doesn't really matter, but it's a remuneration for a factor of production which is called capital. Clearly, it's not the best setting for a company to invest. And it is not, it's, if you will, something which nobody will refuse, that had it not been for the independent power producers, had it not been for the support of groups into the IPPs, most, if not all of the IPPs would fall over financially. Simply because over the last few years, the only way that these companies were able to be supported is because the shareholders were there. Whether it's called Hellenic Petroleum, whether it's called Edison, whether it's called Gaz de France, or whoever else, that's the only reason that we still have the IPPs. So I think that if we're serious about having a true energy transformation in the market, we will need to take some hard decisions, and we would actually need to implement those decisions.
Yeah, that's clear. Hopefully that would work towards that direction. The work that has been done from the ministry that is talking about the energy market design, looking ahead for the next 10 years. But we need to be more concrete in the end and try to tackle all the issues at the root. So following on that, in terms of the electricity market, you did mention that as a business you are there. You are selling electricity to customers. And it's a strategy that does make sense, especially when we're looking at oil and gas majors like Shell announcing very recently that they want to become the #1 electricity producer in the world. So this is the direction where things are going. This is, I think, what also Hellenic Petroleum is doing and moving to that direction. But what do you see any issues, any shortcomings in the structure of the electricity market here? Which probably might have any effect, I guess, with PPC, which might be my kind of next question.
Yes. Well, there are a couple of prerequisites for us to be engaged properly in this new market for us. First of all, we need to cross a mental barrier because in hydrocarbons and in refineries, we're used to big numbers. And you sell with big ships in terms of volume. The values of a transaction are in the millions, if not tens of millions at a time. When it comes to selling in retail, power in retail, it's a totally different business. So first of all, we need to transform and get to know the retail business a lot better so that we can make the right decisions. It's a question of very, very small numbers, repetitive, so it's a question of increasing your revenue per user, per consumer. It's a question of having the right cost of acquisition of a customer and providing the right services. So we're not selling energy. I don't see ourselves as selling energy. We're selling services. Energy is a commodity. So we need to transform there. And refineries are not the best at doing that. That's why we are partnering up with a slightly more knowledgeable partner like Edison through HELPE Edison. Now, you mentioned PPC. PPC is clearly something which has been in the news over the last few months and over the last few days, even more pronounced. Yesterday, there were a lot of statements made by politicians about PPC. It's no mistake that PPC is a part of the market which has not performed very well. And it has a number of issues which, for one or another reason, have not played out, not only for the company itself, for PPC, but also for the market itself. Just to give you some example, the delayed transformation of the production profile. Europe has been shouting about moving away from lignite and into gas as a bridging fuel and into renewables eventually for the last 20 or 30 years. PPC has stuck to its guns in lignite production, which is bringing it to a problematic production profile. You have operational efficiencies. Again, it's something which big companies, especially companies which come from the government sector, are not the best in terms of their operating efficiency. So unless there is a move to improve the operating efficiency of the company, like any other company, clearly that problem will be transferred over to the market. And the last example is the uncontrollable increase of collections from PPC. For one reason or another, I'm not here to make political statements, but that is something which is affecting the market. And it's affecting the market because it creates captivity in the customer base, it creates wrong behavior in the customer base, and at the end of the day, a huge cash flow gap which is picked up by others. And it's a mistake for people to think that what PPC is doing now has no cost. It's a question of sharing the cost. It's shared between banks, it's shared between shareholders, it's shared between the other participants in the market, and that is something which needs to be addressed.
So it poses a systemic risk, from what I understand, due to the size of PPC. It's not only the energy market per se, but maybe that can have a follow-on, let's say, effect in the Greek economy as well. I mean, the banks are trying to, recover from...
It is a systemic risk, but I'm putting a slightly different twist to that. It's not a question whether the lights will go out, and these are the slogans that everybody is using. The cost of an inefficient incumbent is there. It's just a question of who is actually footing the bill. Now we've opted to distribute that cost to different players. If you want a properly operating market, that needs to be fixed. And there is no magic wand. You cannot change PPC from one day to another. What we need as market participants is the signal and the actions that we've taken stock of the situation, we know what is wrong, and we will begin to address that. Now, will that lead to PPC being a performance star in the next year or so? Most likely not. But the question is, you need to stop the drainage, you need to fix the causes, and let the market operate properly.
Well, Mr. Shiamishis, we are only 15 minutes out of our initial timing. I know we have started slightly late anyway from our lunch break. I would like to thank you very much for this broad and open and honest discussion, around the burning issues that we have, not only for the energy sector. You touched upon a lot of things that concern, of course, Hellenic Petroleum. So with that, I would like to thank you again, so much again for being here with us and for supporting us for the conference.
Thank you very much.